Good morning and welcome to the January 21st Saturday meeting of TV Toastmasters Club 9523. I want to welcome all of you who are here in our studio on this icy, wintry morning. We're finally having some winter today, although it's come at us with all of the ice, which we don't usually appreciate too much. But we have a group of determined Toastmasters here in the studio with us today. We have a very good meeting ahead of us this morning. We have 3 speakers. We have Tabletopics. I think it's going to be a very interesting meeting. Those of you who are looking in from home, welcome to TV Toastmasters. I hope you'll enjoy our program that we have today. This broadcast will be shown in February. One of the other things that we have coming up, and this will actually occur in March, is the Area 57 International Speech Contest and Evaluation Contest. And that will be held Saturday, March 17th at the new Union Township branch of the Claremont County Library, and it will be starting at 12:30. And if you've never been to a Toastmasters contest before, it's worth attending. I would invite anyone that's interested in Toastmasters to come and see some of our best speakers at an area contest. I'd like to welcome our Toastmaster for today. She's going to be running our meeting for us. Help me welcome Rita Ferguson. Rita.
Well, good morning, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests, and our listening audience. My job as Toastmaster is to be the genial host, introduce the participants, and keep the meeting flowing, but most importantly, to keep it moving on time. If this is the first time you've been to a Toastmasters meeting, or the first time you're listening in, I'll give you a brief explanation of what you can expect in the next hour or so. A Toastmasters meeting is divided into 3 main segments. The first one is the impromptu session, and during this session, the Tabletopics Master will call upon us to answer a question. We have no idea what the question will be, so of course we can't even prepare an answer, but we're going to try and speak for 1 minute while providing an answer to that question. And to make it more interesting, the grammarian is going to present a word of the day. And we are going to try and weave that word into our responses for the table topics. It's a lot of fun, so I hope that everyone here is willing to give it a try. And then the second segment is a presentation segment in which we have prepared speeches. And the third segment is the listening and responding segment in which we evaluate the speeches and everything else that goes on in the meeting. We'll also be hearing a timers report and a report from our grammarian. So, to get this meeting started, we're going to start with Word of the Day, and our Word of the Day person is Mary Arms. Mary.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to everyone out in our TV land. The word of today is jaunty. It's an adjective and means stylish and carefree. And I'll put it right here. And I hope it's over right. Okay, I hope everyone can read this. And it is jaunty. And thank you. And plus, I'm going to be the word, the all counter and the grammarian. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Jaunty, that's quite a word. We had a little jaunty time getting in this morning also. And now I will introduce Steve Ahrenholz, who will introduce the table topics and call upon us to answer the question. Steve.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters, our honored guests looking in from home. The table topics portion of a Toastmasters meeting is that portion where we learn to become better speakers in an impromptu speaking setting. The way that a Tabletopics works is that I have several questions here I'm going to ask some of our attendees in the studio today. They will basically have the amount of time it takes them to get up here to prepare their response, and then they will give us basically a small speech with an opening, a body, and a conclusion. They'll be addressing the questions that I'm asking them to respond to today. When I was putting together my questions for this morning, and I was doing this last night, I thought, well, we're expecting all this bad weather. This brings me to think about preparedness, because they're talking to Duke Energy about possible power outages, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a continuing issue, preparedness of people for bad weather, emergencies, other disasters that might occur. And because they're unexpected, we don't have time to prepare for them once they've started to happen. The questions that I have will deal with personal preparedness or some aspect of it. And so with that, I will ask my first question. How do you prepare your vehicle for winter driving? And do you think there is something that you should do differently? Madam Toastmaster?
Thank you. Well, in all honesty, I have to say I'm fortunate enough that I have a husband who does that. So one of the things that he did do last night is when I came home from work, he went and put a tarp over both cars. Now, we do have a garage, but we have a lot of animals and we have a lot of stuff in the garage. So our cars are always in the driveway. So this morning, he had to remove the tarp. They were very heavy, though, because of the ice, and they were very stiff because of the ice, but at least the car was clear. Secondly, he put inside the car a container of little ice crystal, little things that melt the ice, so that when I got to where I was going, all I had to do is pull this little container out, sprinkle it around the car, and take it with me, and I could sprinkle my way all the way into the building should it be icy. I picked up Carol on her way. Carol needed a little ice crystal, so I was able to get Carol safely into the vehicle. And I also do have the scraper and the de-icer for the windshield. Everything is in there, so that's how we prepare for winter.
Thank you, Rita. Wow. You gave me a few ideas of something else that I don't have to put into my car. All I have are some reusable shopping bags and a space blanket right now. I do have an ice scraper too, but I thought, well, I better put my blankets and stuff back in. Thank you, Rita. Good response. I'm impressed. What preparations do you have or could you use if you had to deal with a power outage of 48 hours? Mary?
Okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be truthful. I am not prepared. I live in an all-electric apartment. I have no idea what I'm going to do because I depend on the microwave. And my oven is electric. My stove is electric. I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared. The only blankets I have in the house, actually, is my quilt and a sleeping bag. I'm going to freeze. I'm actually going to freeze and I'm going to starve. But there's a Wendy's right around the corner from where I live, so I'm hoping they're open. But that's about it. Actually, I am totally not prepared, the least bit. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Well, I have an idea that you probably have a lot of company, which is one of the concerns that disaster preparedness people have as far as getting people to think about what would you have in advance if something happened. Now, you mentioned a couple things that you do have. You have a sleeping bag. You do have a blanket or a quilt. I trust you have a can opener that's not electric. Okay. So there are things that you could have. Heat is an issue, and the Wendy's, hopefully they have a backup generator. The third question that I'm going to ask today, do you think that evacuation of large metropolitan areas is still a realistic way of dealing with natural or man-made disasters, and why or why not? I'd like Sheila to answer this question for us. We'll see what her thinking is on evacuation of a large metropolitan area. Sheila?
Well, of course, evacuation of a large metropolitan area depends on a great number of things. The first one is it an anticipated disaster? For example, in Miami, it would be an anticipated disaster to have a hurricane. It is not an anticipated disaster to have an earthquake. Two different kinds of things. Or some sort of terrorist attack. In case of a hurricane, there is a very good plan and a way for people to leave. It still doesn't get everybody out unless they go out 2 to 3 days ahead. In cases where you don't have 2 to 3 days, most of the plans don't work well. People have to stay in place. In case of snow, staying in place is probably the most sensible thing to do. A disaster that involves ice and snow, stay where you are and listen for emergency announcements. In a place where there is a flood, if you have enough time, I suggest that the only thing that you would be told would be to leave the area if you're in the floodplain. But in most cases, people don't pay attention to the last second. They're absolute disasters, and everybody complains about the situation. All in all, from what I have seen over the last 5 to 10 years, it hasn't worked. So I think what we're going to have to do is look at better planning and a wider view of what could happen along the way. It's a what if. That's great, but what if you can't use that road? What if you can't do this? So it's a possibility. I think we can improve on the situation, but in general, you're better off staying where you are. Mr. Tabletopics, can you answer?
Thank you, Sheila. I think you pointed out some of the issues and the importance of being prepared to shelter in place, which is becoming more and more of an approach that we're seeing for a number of emergency responses. I'm going to return our meeting to the Toastmaster for today because we have quite a few things in our meeting this morning. Let me turn our meeting back to our Toastmaster, Sheila, or Rita. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Steve. And as my father would say, you can call me anything, just don't call me late for dinner. That concludes the impromptu session, and now we will move into the speech session, and this is when we now give our prepared speeches. Our first speaker this evening is Don Wess. Don has been a member of TV Toastmasters for nearly 4 years, and he is working from the Competent Communicator Manual. He'll be doing speech number 9, which is Persuade with Power. The title of his speech is The Mandela. Don Wess.
Thank you, Rita. You've all had some interest in science. There are many areas of science that encompass your interests. One is like the macro world, the world of the stars and the moon and the constellations. There's also the micro world, the world of the molecule and the atoms and the various other small particles that people explore and look for. There's the world of medicine, the medicine world where people examine the human body and the cures for the body. There's another world that people often look at. I'm sure all of you, or many of you, are interested in that world. It's the world that Carl Jung devoted his life to a study of. He's one of the persons that devoted his life to a study of this world, and he called it the world of the self. The world of the self. It can be represented by a mandala, at least I'll do that this morning. This is an example of a mandala that illustrates all the various parts of the self. Each one beautiful in itself, but put together form a magnificent whole. Some of the parts of the self include the ego, the various archetypes within the collective, and then there's also a personal unconscious. An example of how this works in one way, at least, it would be there was a boy who was working with his dad on a motor, and he felt pretty good about working with his dad and accomplishing something. And he was taken aback when his dad became angry at him. His dad told him he wasn't doing it right, and it will never amount to anything, and that he can't do anything right. That affected him and brought something from the collective unconscious up into his personal unconscious, and it stayed with him the rest of his life. So that certain instances, certain people, places, things, an event, a word perhaps, would excite anxiety within him, and he didn't know where it was coming from, and would overcome the normally functioning ego. That is one example of how this world works in a certain way, according to Jung. There are some ways that we can cure this problem or work on this problem. One is by knowing our projections, being aware of our projections. There was a lady in therapy who kept asking her therapist what she should do, and he kept putting her off. He didn't want to tell her what to do. He wanted her to decide what to do for herself. And one day she said, "Why are people so mean to me?" And the therapist said, "Why are you so mean to people?" And she got very upset and stormed out. And from time to time she would write letters to her therapist telling him how bad a therapist he was, how bad a person he was, and how stupid he was for telling her to not giving her what she wanted and calling her mean to people. Well, she kept copies of these letters, and one day she sat down and read them, and all of a sudden it dawned on her, and she called her therapist up and wanted another meeting with him, and he said that he was expecting her to come back. She had this insight about herself that involved the shadow. It was a negative part of the shadow that she had brought forth in her projections. Each archetype has a positive and a negative aspect to it, a bright and a dark aspect. Another way of accessing the unconscious is by way of our dreams. There was a lady who had a dream about walking on the moon. She talked to her therapist about walking on the moon and gave him certain details about it, and then she ended by saying, "Of course I wasn't really walking on the moon, it wasn't the real moon." The therapist said, "Oh, but it was the real moon, in contrast to the one that you see up in the sky at night." It took her a couple of weeks to understand the meaning of that particular insight. So what I'm trying to do today is persuade you, if you have not done it already, to look more deeply into your dreams, your projections. And through that we can understand ourselves better, grow more quickly, rather than just depend on the natural growth as we age. We can facilitate the functioning of ourselves in the world. So how many have I persuaded to do that? How many of you in the studio audience? Oh, great, I see a lot of hands. And also out there in the viewing audience, I see a lot of you have your hands up too. So, my work is done. This is Toastmaster.
Thank you, Don. That's the first time ever I've seen a mandala. I must be new to this. For our evaluator's sake, we will put 1 minute on the timer, and we'll have one minute of silence so the evaluations can be written. Welcome back. Our second speaker is Barron, and Rick was our former president of the TV Toastmasters, and he's also our area governor. He's speaking this evening from a advanced manual called Storytelling. And the name of his speech is This Is It. This is it, Rick Barron.
Thank you, Rita, very much. Little background's necessary for my story today. This is a story of regret and love. My father passed away unexpectedly in October after heart valve surgery, and he's been in my thoughts and in my heart every day since he departed. And I was asking myself, I wonder what was going through his mind in those last few seconds. And this is my interpretation of my father's last few seconds. And so there are a few characters that I need to introduce you to. The first is myself. He refers to me as Ricky or Ich, which is the Japanese word for number 1, because I'm the oldest son. My brother's name is Kevin. My sister's name is Kendra, and he refers to her as Pussycat or Puss. Our mother is Sally, his first wife, and his second wife is Nancy. Those are some of the characters that will be in the story today. Is this it? 71 years old? Wow, that's young. I haven't really been a poster child for health and fitness because I really have led a jaunty life. Eating what I like, not exercising, ignoring the warning signs. I've got pretty much every disease known to modern medicine. Shouldn't really be a surprise to me. But it's a shame I was doing so well after the surgery. I was up and around the first day, and the second day, I was doing laps in the ICU with Rick. And just 2 hours ago, they were talking about moving me upstairs to a room. The room is really starting to fill with people. They all seem quite hurried. I really have had great care while I've been here. The nurses upstairs, the doctors, everybody has been so fabulous. I particularly liked Dana and Karen. I hope that nurse last night wasn't upset that I sent her out of the room. I just wasn't feeling well, and I hope she can forgive me. There are so many things that I wanted to do in my life that I've yet to do. I wanted to see the pyramids. I wanted to go to the rainforest. I wanted to walk on a glacier in Alaska. Heck, I wanted to see my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren graduate from college, go to their weddings. You know, there's a possibility that I could have held my great-great-great-grandson or daughter in my arms. I guess not. You know what? Nancy didn't make it in to see me today. I hope she's strong enough to really accept this. And I never had a chance to say goodbye to Kev. But I have had a fabulous life. I grew up with family and a Polish upbringing. My grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins. It really was a fabulous childhood. We didn't have a lot, but we had each other, and that really was special. I had some very special relationships in scouting and in my fraternity in high school and college. I really wish I'd stayed in contact with them a little bit more. Great people. I just never took the time to stay in contact. And the family, wow, 3 wonderful kids. I'm so proud of them. Each and every one of them has done really great things within their lives. I remember back that first trip that we took across country. It's in the back of that Volkswagen, what was it? 54, 55, 56 Volkswagen convertible that we drove from Cleveland all the way to Southern California. Him in the back with all the stuff piled in there. Wow. Our new life starting. What an experience. And that first Christmas in Hawaii, where we were on the beach, I was playing in the surf, Itch was on the sand with Sal. She was crying because it was her first Christmas away from home in Buffalo. Then the tours in Vietnam, the time that we spent in Japan, the trips that Sal and I took to Tokyo, to Hong Kong, to Manila, the family vacations to the beaches in Japan, wow. And the way back where we had the opportunity to sail under the Golden Gate Bridge at sunrise. What a fabulous experience. The time that we spent in Southern California and the camping trips that we took as a family. Grand Canyon, Yosemite, all of the parks in California. Those were some really special times together. They really were. The family weddings, birthdays, and other celebrations. It really has been a wonderful life. And the work experiences that I've had, the people that I've been able to mentor, Randy, Rich, and Kurt with ServiceMaster. Wow. So many people that I've been able to impact in my life. And I've been so blessed. I truly have to have them in my life at this time. It really has been a great life. Oh no. I see that Karen has a tear in her eye. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. We'll have 1 minute of silence so the evaluators can prepare the evaluation. Our third speaker this evening is Sheila Mudd-Baker. Sheila is presenting a speech from a competent communicator, and it's back to her icebreaker. The icebreaker is the first speech. Now, Sheila is a distinguished Toastmaster, so she's given an icebreaker more than once, and she is convinced that life is a big circle because she keeps coming back to the same places, the same questions, the same problems she's always had. I'm very interested in hearing Sheila Mudd-Baker, the Empress of the Universe. The Empress of the Universe, Sheila Mudd-Baker.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. When I was 10 years old, I decided that I needed to know what I was going to be when I grew up. So my parents had suggested that I might be President of the United States because, well, no woman had ever been President of the United States, and why not a member of our family? Okay, I can do that. I looked around, I listened to what everybody was saying, and I discovered that if you had even had a B in grade school, somebody would dig that up and show that you were inadequate, at least at that time. I didn't know George W. would become president. And therefore, I could not run for president of the United States because I had less than a perfect A in school. So that was a barrier. So I thought, okay, well, I don't need to be president of the United States. Everybody wants to be president of the United States. Well, why don't I be a police officer? Well, in those days, police officers didn't wear glasses, at least not young police officers when they started, or even contact lenses. Later on, things changed, but at that time, that wasn't a possibility. And besides, I didn't want someone hitting me. I just didn't like that idea. I also love the idea of being a firefighter. Firefighter, oh, how exciting. You get a Dalmatian. I knew, I was 10 years old. Dalmatian, you wore braces, suspenders, you got to play chess, you got to hang out in front and talk to people. That sounded like a good job. But I was afraid of heights. So being on a ladder wasn't going to work for me. And I really didn't want to get burned. And that's one of the possibilities when you're a firefighter. Astronaut, well, if I'm afraid of ladders, I'm really afraid of being up and falling down. That's not a possibility. And besides, when I was 10, the only astronauts were monkeys, as I recall. There weren't, or dogs. There weren't people who were astronauts. So I had knocked out all the glamorous occupations. Maybe doctor. Wasn't very good at science and math, but I continued with that through college. That didn't work. I kept thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up. I finally came to the solution. I would get a job that no one else had thought of having. I would create my own job. I am a job creator. I am going to be the Empress of the universe. Now, I figured nobody else is going to take that title. Nobody but a fool would try to take my title from me because I thought up the title. It's my title. Now, I had to start to think about a job description for Empress of the Universe. I mean, you could tell people you're Empress of the Universe, but their first question is, so what is that? Well, what do you do? So I had to be in charge of multiple planets and solar systems. Again, that caused the problem. I thought about it. I might have to leave the Earth. I'd never been on a plane. I wasn't sure I could even go, I could do that, is to leave the Earth. And if I did leave the Earth, I would probably have alien forces. And we'd all seen aliens in movies, and they were scary. I wasn't sure I wanted an alien group to, well, but I didn't mind bossing them around because I love to boss people around. You can ask my sister, who's a member of this group. Yes, I loved bossing people around. And then I realized that, like Alexander the Great, I probably wouldn't make it to my 30th birthday because someone would kill me wanting to be Empress of the Universe themselves. So, instead I went on to a life as a teacher, as a storyteller, as an actor, as a civil servant, as a trainer. And these days, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I do know that I haven't gotten much further along than when I was 10 years old. And earlier today, Carmeling gave me this wonderful poem, and I love it because it reminds me of the way I think. I keep doing the same things over and over again, and I don't seem to learn from that. And we all know that's the definition of insanity. Chapter 1. I walk down a street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Recognize that? Chapter 2. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault. Still takes a long time to get out. That must be marriage number 2. Chapter number 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the high sidewalk. I see it. It is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Much better. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. I'm on chapter 4. I still want to be Empress of the Universe. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Sheila. You have given us much to think about. One more minute on the timer for the evaluator to write the evaluation. Welcome back. We have now finished the presentation session of the meeting, and we move into the evaluation session. I will also be the general evaluator, and so I will introduce myself. As general evaluator, I will evaluate everything about the meeting, and I will also introduce the evaluators, who will give us some insight on the speeches. Our first evaluator this evening is Carol Cormelink, who will provide an evaluation for Don Wess's speech. Carol.
Thank you, General Evaluator and fellow Toastmasters. The Persuade with Power that Don did, it asked how did he project sincerity and conviction. I love your speeches, Don, because you're so brilliant. You bring out a lot of deep thinking, and I'm a sort of shallow thinker. I don't think really deep. But I was looking for a little more explanation when you held up the mandala. I found out it's pronounced mandala. Mandala. I was expecting a little more when you're making points with the different aspects of your mind that you might have been pointing to things on the mandala itself. So I was expecting that. But I thought that and at first I said I didn't see a thread connecting each thought, but I think when you wrapped it up and said that you wanted us to look at our projections and our dreams to learn what we could learn from them, I thought you did that well. You might have had a little more vocal variety. You're a very quiet-spoken man, but I have noticed a vast improvement in your confidence level from when you first were up here. You had good eye contact with everyone in the audience, and I did notice more confidence up here. The quietness of your voice did not lend itself a lot. There could have been a little more vocal variety, more in emphasizing words. And I should give you an example to make that meaningful. Was the speech organization effective? As I said, I didn't see the thread right in the beginning that linked each thought to the next thought, but I thought you sort of tied it all together at the end. And was I persuaded to accept the speaker's views? Well, I was writing your evaluation while you were asking that, so I'm not quite sure if I was persuaded. I think several people the people at the viewing audience, and you could see that they were accepting your views. That was very good. And I did like that humor when you said that you saw the hands of the people in the viewing audience that they accepted your views. But I liked seeing the beautiful mandala and understanding a little more about what it's all about. Thank you, Madam General Evaluator.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for providing that insight and giving Don some good tips for his next speech. And I am the evaluator for Rick Barron, and Rick had given the beautiful story about his father. And for this project, the speaker was to prepare and present an original story designed to evoke emotion among listeners using description and dialogue. The speaker was not to use notes or scripts when telling the story. And you did a very commendable job coming up with the microphone only, not having anything in front of you, and just speaking as if you were your father. That was extremely effective. At first I thought perhaps since we had the entire stage area that you could have moved a little more, but then I thought maybe not. Maybe it's more effective just standing there, because after all your father is a dying man and these are just thoughts going through his head, and your ability to express yourself so well evokes that emotion of what would we be thinking if we were in that same situation. Perhaps the only thing that I could really think that would have made it better is you had given us the names of the characters that were going to be in the, would have been your brother and your sister, but they really weren't characters in that story to a large degree. So perhaps instead of having the nurse's name and his first wife's name, maybe you could have just combined some of those into another character so that it would have been your father, you, your brother, and your sister, and just focus on that. And the other thing that perhaps just thinking about was maybe could there have been some conflict in your father's life that you could have brought out that could have been resolved. But that's a minor issue, and I know you're restricted to 6 to 8 minutes, but you did an excellent job with just portraying your father, and that did evoke emotions because many of us have had a father who passed away, and we know how we felt with those final moments. So very good, Rick, and we look forward to the next one. And our third evaluator for Sheila Mudd-Baker is Steve Ahrenholz. Steve?
Thank you, Madam General Evaluator, fellow Toastmasters, our Toastmasters looking in from home, and Sheila. What a delightful speech. This was the first speech in the Competent Communicator Manual, the Icebreaker. One of the purposes of this speech is for a new member to introduce him or herself to the club and begin speaking before an audience. We had an opportunity today to actually see someone who has been speaking before audiences for some time already. One of the comments Sheila gave me as she had finished her speech was that we really didn't learn much about her at all in today's speech. I disagree with that. We got to see some of her strong points, her good sense of humor, her use of nonverbal language. I thought that Sheila presented some excellent examples of facial expression, how she used her eyes to accompany what she was talking about. We also got to see a bit of how Sheila perceives herself. She describes a rather jaunty individual. I really enjoyed her comment that she still didn't know what she wanted to be when she grew up, because I have that same struggle, and I think I'm not even sure if I know when I'll recognize having gotten there. She's also very down to earth. We got to see some of her insights into various occupations she was thinking about undertaking on her way to becoming Empress of the Universe. And that she didn't like heights but wanted to be an astronaut, I thought was really interesting because, you know, tens of thousands of feet above the Earth, I guess that is a little bit high if you're afraid of heights. Her speaking was very clear, audible, good volume. She had a definite opening, body, and conclusion to her speech. One of the things that she did in her speech that I liked, she started talking about these chapters. You had a sense of flow with the speech. You had an idea you were going somewhere. The humor that she introduced was the fact that chapters 1, 2, and 3 started to all sound quite similar, but this is also where we learned that sometimes Sheila has to really convince herself of something before she decides to move on. I can appreciate that too. What could she have done to improve the speech? Well, I had to look for this, but one of the recommendations that I would offer is that a pause or two for emphasis. You had a few points in your speech that I thought were really good. There was some feedback coming from the audience, some laughter. I think that you could have just allowed a little longer pause for emphasis, maybe with some additional nonverbal communication, a few more facial expressions, especially with this being on television. The audience at home gets to see the facial expressions that you're giving us as you're presenting your material. It's almost like we can see a little bit of what's going on inside your head. What did I like about the presentation? One of the things I thought was interesting, and again, you know, this is a speech. Sheila told me we didn't learn much about her, but I think we saw some frank honesty presented with humor, done in an uplifting and entertaining manner. Even though, I have written down here, even though you didn't think we learned much about you, we learned something about how you see yourself. Madam General Evaluator?
Thank you, Steve. There are other people who are part of the evaluation team. One is the art counter and Marion. And Mary has listened to everything we said and all the pauses that we made that maybe we shouldn't have made or words we used we shouldn't have used, and she will tell us about that. So, Mary.
Well, as I listened to everyone of what they have said, I think I missed a lot of stuff. I don't know. But, Steve, you used the word jaunty 2 times and the word but 2 times. Rita, you used jaunty once, but you said not you, it should be but you. Okay? Sheila used the word jaunty once and but 3 times. Don, didn't find anything wrong. See, about 100,000 mistakes. Rick used jaunty once, and you said shouldn't. It should be should not. And Carol, you said didn't instead of did not. And Sheila, I have something to tell you. You've been dethroned. Thank you very much.
Well, I guess if there's going to be somebody who is going to dethrone the Empress of the Universe, it may as well be her sister. My final comments on the meeting was that we had a small group, but my goodness, we all took on more than one role, and the whole meeting came together nicely. I do have to say, Carol did catch something that I did, and that this meeting is being held in the morning. And I said, this evening. So thank you, Carol, for catching that. I will need to be more aware. I don't have any other comments, so I will turn the meeting back to our president, Steve Ahrenholz. Steve.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, Madam General Evaluator. Let's have some applause for our Toastmaster today. Thank you, Rita. As Rita mentioned, there were a number of us here that took a number of roles today. I always find it amazing how many things we can do considering human beings aren't real good multitaskers. At least I'm not. I was directing while Sheila was presenting her speech, and I also was her evaluator. So I found myself thinking, okay, I need to have a few things to respond to as far as specific points I'm going to evaluate her on. Our next meeting will be Thursday, February 2nd, starting at 6 p.m. at the Anderson Community Television Studio. This is in Anderson Community Center, 7855 Mile Road. Our next Saturday meeting will be February 18th, starting at 9 a.m., and that will be our club contest. We will be having the International Speech Contest and the Evaluation Contest as a part of that meeting. Guests are always welcome. We'd love to have you come and visit us. With that, I want to wish you all safe travels back home today. Tomorrow's supposed to be back up to 50, our bizarre winter weather.